Hi, I'm Jennifer with True North Leatherworks, and today I'm going to show you how to make my Pocket Pal cow using the kit that I have today. Okay, so here we have our cow Pocket Pal kit. This one is different from the others in that it's two separate pieces. So all my previous Pocket Pals were just one piece that you folded over. This one, we have a little bit more work to do. We have to keep our pieces lined up, and we're making a shape. It's not a straight line like what we did before. So first off, you have two pieces of thread here you want to separate, and then we've got our needle on some washi tape. That's just to make it easy to find. Then you're going to thread your needle through the eye with the thread, and then you're going to poke your needle through the thread. You're going to do that twice. That helps lock the thread onto your needle so you don't lose your thread. Okay, so now we are ready to get started. Okay, so this first little bit is going to be a little bit more challenging. Now here is where you want to decide, do you want your knot on the outside back? You won't see the knot if you're holding it like this, but if you turn it over you could. Or you can put your knot on the inside, which if it's open you'll see it, but if it's closed it's not. So this is all just personal preference. It doesn't really matter. Just a matter of overthinking things. Okay, here we have our cow Pocket Pal kit. So I've got two pieces of thread here. I'm going to separate those. Some washi tape on a needle so it doesn't get lost. I'm actually going to go ahead and thread my needle real quick. So put it through the eye, and go ahead and stab the tip of your needle through your thread. Pull it down the needle and then pull the thread. And it's locked on. Okay, so I put the snaps on like that, but it really goes like this. But we're going to unsnap it for sewing. Now on the black one I showed you with the knots on the, or I showed you the threads on the front, so I'm going to show you starting and ending on the back on this one. Start on the first. So I'm going to do my knot on this side because it'll be it won't show once it's closed up. So again, this is personal preference. You can start on the front or the back. It doesn't really affect how you're going to stitch. Okay, so I'm leaving a tail about this long. Then I'm going to go in through that hole. And if you've done any of my kits before, then this is pretty similar. You're just going in and out, in and out. There's a little bit of a curvature, little curve that we're working through. So here, my needle's having a hard time finding the hole. There we go. Make sure I don't catch on my ear. If you find that you're having a hard time getting the needle to go through a hole, sometimes taking the needle and poking from the other direction will make it easier. So I'm making sure that I go into every single hole, but it alternates which direction I'm coming from. Okay, I don't want to wrap my thread around like this. I want to make sure that it's laying straight across. So if I come out on the back, then I go in on the back. And then if I come out on the front, then I'm going to go in on the front. And I am just going to keep going like this. Nothing too exciting. This one will take longer than the previous Pocket Pal kits that I have sold. So if you've done those ones, those didn't take too long. This one will take a little bit longer. Okay. So pull through, hang on to the tail.
Mm-hmm.
You can see my holes. Oops. And we're just going to continue through, making sure we're not skipping holes. Make sure you don't wrap around like that. Remember to pull the thread snugly enough that the leather is together and there's no gaps right through here. If I pull with my needle, you can see. But also not so tight that your leather is bunching together. You don't want that. So as you are making your stitches, make sure that you're pulling your thread snug. You don't want it so tight that your leather is bunching or looking all wrinkled, but at the same time you don't want it so loose that you can see space between the layers of leather. You can see that there's no space there, they're snugly together, and that is what you want your thread and leather to do. And if you do it too loose, then you will run out of thread. So that's another reason to make sure that you're stitching snugly enough. So just make sure you're not missing any holes as you go. Oops, like right there, I skipped a hole. This is where it's good to keep an eye on things. I didn't even notice that. Okay, so if you do something wrong and you need to back up, don't try to pull your thread and have it go through that way. It's harder. Just take your the tip of your needle and go back through the holes that you went through. So apparently I did that at an angle because it was a correct hole on the front, but not on the back. Okay, so here you can see I had gone through that hole as opposed to this one. So now I'm going to double check. Flipping it back and forth, to make sure that your stitching is correct is a good idea. There's no real trick to this. This is just stitching hole to hole to hole. So I will probably speed up at least some of this stitching I don't anticipate there being any issues as I go. And I almost skipped a stitch there, so I'm gonna think around these ears especially, because that's where I skipped it before, was on the other ear. So as you're kind of making turns with your stitches, double check that you're not missing any holes along the way. Okay, I am just about done. I've got just a couple holes left. Oops. Okay, so the thread that I gave you is only long enough to go around the cow once. I've done it before with one long piece so I could turn around and go back, but that ends up being a lot of thread to be pulling through and pulling through. So I decided to give you two separate pieces of thread. So I'm leaving tails here, and then I'm going to cut the thread right off my needle. There we go. And then I'm going to take my other piece of thread and thread it just as I did before. making sure to poke through the thread so that the thread doesn't slide right out of the needle. Okay, so on the last couple holes. Okay, so I'm starting and finishing backside. So I'm going to cut and leave a tail. Knocked on my camera. Okay, and then I'm going to cut the thread off my needle. And then grab the other piece of thread and thread it just as I did before. And locking the thread onto the needle so we don't lose our thread. Okay, so now I'm going to go back the way I came. So I ended right here. So that's my tail there. And I am actually going to start on the second hole. And this works regardless of whether you're starting on the front or the back. Okay, so now I've got two tails here. I'm going to hold them in place. Because I was on the second hole, I'm going to go back to the first hole, which, yes, there's a stitch there already, but that's okay. We're just doing some back stitching here. Okay, so now we're going to go through the first hole on both sides. Then you can see there's no thread right there, so we're going to go through here. And then from here on out, we will just be filling in, because we have the spaces in between where you have thread and then space. And it's the same on the back. So now we are doing the stitching to fill in all those spaces so it's a nice even line of stitching and thread. And this is the same thing that we did before. Just check back and forth to make sure you're hitting the right holes. Don't want that. And I will probably speed this part up again. Okay, so I ended here. So that's the first hole. I'm going to move to the second hole. I want my threads, my tails, to be on the same side. So I've got two tails there now. So I came out the second side, and I'm going to go in the second side, second hole. I'm going to go in the first hole. I'll back stitch one. And then I'm holding onto the tails so they don't move. Then I'm going to go back through the second hole and then move on to the third hole. And that is where I will start filling in the spaces in between the stitches I did on the first round. See that in a minute. My tails are still there. Okay, so we are just about done with this line of stitching. We're almost to the end. Just continuing the way we came. You can see I was flipping back and forth to check and double check that my needles are in the right place. Okay, so here, got one last hole here. But I still have an opening here. So I'm going to hold my tail and go through that. I'm going to come out on the back side. You can see it's a little bit loose. So that's why we hang onto our tail. Then I'm going to back stitch and go back through the second hole so that now both pieces are on this side, just like here. Okay, so then I will trim the ends. Okay, I just have a couple more stitches left. There. Okay, so if you look over here, even that space has a stitch in it, whereas right now this one doesn't. So I'm going to hold the tail out of the way and put my needle through that last hole, and then back stitch to the second hole and pull it through. Okay, I'm going to trim my threads. Okay, and then this is the part where you get a responsible adult to help you. Grab a lighter. I prefer these longer ones. They're easier to control than the little tiny lighters. And I'm going to hold it parallel to my project. If I hold it like this, I'll burn the leather or the thread. I'll make a mess. So hold it this way, and then I'm going to carefully, you can see it's burning a little bit. So I use my thumbs, don't do that. You can, but you risk being burned. It's better to use the end of your lighter so you don't get burned. So you can tell that it does catch fire, but also melts. This is waxed thread. So melting is good because then we can just do that, and then you have just these little spots here that aren't super visible. And then you have a cute little cow. Nice seams there, and there you go, all done. Okay, and then I'm going to use my lighter. I'm holding it parallel. I'm pointing away from my threads so I don't melt the wrong ones. Okay, and here you have a cute little cow pocket pal. Good job. So my thread and needle, I actually like to leave a bit of thread if there's a little bit left. I will leave that on there to make it easier to find. And then I'm just going to stick it in my bag so I have it for later if I have another project come up where I need a needle. And all done.